The anniversary of the first ever Spitfire flight has been marked with a flypast above the grave of its designer. Reginald Mitchell died before the plane entered production in Southampton. He only ever saw his K5054 prototype airborne on its first test flight on the 5th of March 1936. And let's just leave you now with some live pictures from Hatay in Turkey, one of the worst affected areas in the earthquake which killed 50,000 people. You're watching BBC News.
This is BBC News. Welcome if you're watching here in the UK or around the globe. I'm Lucy Hockings. Our top stories. 1 month on after the devastating earthquakes that killed more than 50,000 people in Turkey and Syria, many are still living without proper shelter.
I'm Anna Foster in the city of Antakya, one of the worst hit areas in southern Turkey, where efforts to rebuild are only just beginning.
A suicide attack in southwest Pakistan has killed at least 9 police officers, the explosion striking a police truck in Baluchistan province. Migrants crossing the English Channel in small boats would be banned from ever returning to the UK under new government plans, but refugee charities say the proposals are unfair and unworkable. Bangladesh authorities are investigating the cause of a massive fire in the world's largest refugee camp, which has left 12,000 people without shelter. And the stars behind the Irish comedy, The Banshees of Inisherin, speak to us ahead of the Oscars, which are on Sunday.
To feel it as colloquial and then see it go out into the world and be received by people from all sorts of, the corners of the globe that we share has been pretty surprising and cool.
Hello and welcome to viewers in the UK and around the world. Exactly a month after the devastating earthquakes which killed more than 50,000 people across Turkey and Syria, an unprecedented number of people are living without proper shelter. We've heard from the UN. They say that in Turkey alone, at least 1.5 million people still inside the disaster zone are homeless now, and the true figure could be even higher. And to show you just how bad things still are, we have a live shot for you. This is Hatay, and you can see here that the devastation is all too obvious. The earthquake and subsequent tremors that we saw injured more than 108,000 people in Turkey. As I mentioned, millions were left sheltering in tents. People have had to move to other cities as well. Hatay was really badly affected by the earthquake, and we've got UNICEF as well saying today 2.5 million children are in need of humanitarian assistance as well. But you can see the crane there in the front of the shot. The cleanup continues, but that image alone just gives you a sense of the scale of the devastation. And witnessing it all for us at the moment is our Middle East correspondent Anna Foster, who joins us now from Antakya. And I know you've been speaking to many people about how their lives have changed in the past month, what they're experiencing. Tell us some of those stories.
And so we must be doing all we can to help them do that.
Joe, thank you for taking the time. Joe English there from UNICEF, just also showing us around there and the incredible damage that still exists 1 month on. We will be live in Syria and in Turkey throughout the day here on BBC News. So do stay with us as we continue to bring you those stories. But we're going to take you to Pakistan now, because in the southwest, a suicide bomber has killed at least 9 policemen. The explosion striking a police truck in the southwestern city of Sibi, which is in Baluchistan. Hospital medics are saying at least 15 others have been injured in the blast. There has been a series of recent attacks across Pakistan targeting police officers. What is not clear yet is who was behind this latest incident. Let's go live to Islamabad. We can join our correspondent there, Caroline Davies. Caroline, what are police saying about this latest attack in Baluchistan? Caroline, thanks for the update. Migrants who cross the English Channel on small boats to enter the UK will be removed from the country, banned from future re-entry and unable to apply for British citizenship under new legislation. Now, in the coming days, the government will lay out its plans to fulfil one of the Prime Minister's pledges to crack down on people who enter the UK illegally. Let's take you to our chief political correspondent, Nick Eardley, who joins us now from Westminster. Firstly, Nick, how important politically is this for Rishi Sunak, for the Prime Minister, to be tackling migrants? Nick, thank you so much. Thousands of people have been left without shelter after a massive fire broke out in a crowded Rohingya refugee camp in southeastern Bangladesh. The blaze engulfed about 2,000 shelters at Cox's Bazar. It's estimated around 12,000 refugees, most of whom escaped violence in neighbouring Myanmar, are now homeless. Hundreds are returning to the area. They're trying to see what they can salvage from the ruins. The cause of the fire, which broke out on Sunday, is not yet known. Luckily, though, no casualties have been reported. Well, the International Federation of Red Cross has been helping on the ground with rescue and relief efforts. Rishikesh Harachandan from the organisation joins me now live from Cox's Bazar. Thank you for taking the time. It must be incredibly busy for you at the moment. We appreciate you talking to us. Can you give us a sense of the scale of the devastation? Rishikesh, good luck in the coming days as you attempt to restore some of those basic services as well that are so desperately needed. Thank you very much for joining us from Cox's Bazar. Police searching for 3 women and 2 men who were reported missing after a night out in Cardiff have found 3 of them dead and 2 with serious injuries. The 5 friends were last seen in Cardiff in the early hours of Saturday night, when police say the car was recovered in the early hours of the morning. The 3 dead have not yet been identified. Let's take you to our Wales correspondent, Paul Griffith, who joins us now from Cardiff. What is the latest from police? Well, thank you for joining us from Cardiff with that. Ambulance workers in England have called off strikes which are due to take place today and Wednesday. The Unite Union will enter pay talks with ministers. 2 other ambulance workers' unions, Unison and GMB, had already paused their walkouts after what they said was a huge shift in the government's position. The trial of a man accused of shooting dead a 9-year-old girl inside her own home in Liverpool begins today. Olivia Pratt-Corbell was killed in August last year when a gunman allegedly opened fire while chasing another man who had forced his way into the house. 34-year-old Thomas Cashman denies murder. And the former Met police officer Wayne Couzens will be sentenced for 3 counts of indecent exposure, one of which took place just days before he murdered Sarah Everard. Couzens had admitted the offences, which took place at a fast food restaurant in Kent and in Woodland. He's currently serving a life sentence for the kidnap, rape and murder of 33-year-old Sarah Everard after he used his position as a serving police officer to trick her into getting into his car. And let's just leave you with those live pictures today from Hatay in Turkey that we can see right now, an area absolutely devastated by the earthquakes that took place a month ago. You can just see the level of destruction left behind in the wake of those earthquakes, reducing those buildings to rubble.
Now on BBC World News, the latest business news from across the globe. World Business Report.
The world's second largest economy sets its sights on a slowdown. China lowers its growth targets as it emerges from its extended COVID lockdowns. And the Credit Suisse crisis deepens. The biggest shareholder in the scandal-hit Swiss bank dumps its stake. So what next for the former giant of Swiss banking? Hello, welcome along. This is World Business Report. I'm Ben Thompson. Now we start in China, the world's second largest economy, because it's set out its economic forecast for the year ahead. Well, the country has set pretty modest targets for economic growth this year. They've come in at around 5%. That's as it kicked off the annual session of its National People's Congress. That is poised to implement the biggest government shake-up in a decade. While last year, successive strict lockdowns slowed growth in China, official figures showed that the world's second largest economy grew by 3% last year, which was way below the government target of 5.5%. It was also its slowest in decades. Well, let's speak to Janet Mew, who is head of market analysis at Brewin Dolphin. Janet, good to see you. Talk to me about this slowdown, because it's the sort of figure that most developed economies would love to have right now, but a slowdown to 5% marks quite a shift in China's economic outlook. One we'll keep a close eye on. Janet, for now, thanks so much. Janet Mew there at Brewin Dolphin. And now we're going to stay with Asia, because Foxconn, which is the maker of Apple's iPhones, has said it could create 100,000 jobs in India after announcing plans to shift production out of China. On Friday, the southern Indian state of Karnataka said that Foxconn had announced a major deal there. Well, that follows supply chain disruption last year that led to shortages. That all caused by China's strict COVID lockdowns. Well, our India business correspondent, Arunade Mukherjee, has the details. Now, there is more bad news for Credit Suisse. One of the bank's biggest shareholders, that's Harris Associates, has sold its entire stake in the Swiss bank. Well, the fund held a 10% stake in August, which it reduced actually to 5% in January. It's now offloaded that entirely. Well, the head of the fund has told the Financial Times they're worried about the future of the firm. It leaves the Saudi National Bank as the largest shareholder in Credit Suisse. Let's get the thoughts now of Sunaina Sinha-Haldea, who is Global Head of Private Capital at Raymond James. Thank you for being with us. And just remind us the background to this story. It's fascinating, the fall of a giant, and then the headlines today don't make for any welcome news for Credit Suisse. Sunaina, good to have your thoughts. Thank you for being with us there from Raymond James. Appreciate your time today. Just time to tell you a couple of other business stories. Starbucks is to open 100 new stores across the UK this year and invest millions upgrading its existing cafes. That comes as the world's largest coffee chain reports a big jump in sales for the UK in 2022. That's as it recovers from the pandemic. At the end of last year, the company had 1,066 stores in the UK, its largest outside of America. Much more on all those stories on the business pages of the BBC News website. I'm on Twitter at BBC Ben Thompson. We'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for being with us on BBC News. Insiders at the social media giant Twitter have told BBC's Panorama that the company is no longer able to protect users from online abuse, state-coordinated disinformation and child sexual exploitation. It follows the mass sackings and changes under new owner Elon Musk. Exclusive academic research and testimony from Twitter users supports their allegations, suggesting hate is thriving under Mr. Musk's leadership. Our social media and disinformation correspondent Mariana Spring reports. And you can watch BBC Panorama, Elon Musk's Twitter storm at 8 p.m. tonight on BBC One and on the iPlayer. You can also read more on the BBC News website. University students in England have told BBC News they're having to skip lectures and miss deadlines to prioritise paid work instead. A Sutton Trust opinion poll suggests almost 50% of students are putting part-time work first in order to cope with cost of living pressures. Let's talk now to BBC reporter Christian Johnson, who's been looking into this for us. Christian, you've been speaking to lots of students. What sort of stories have they been telling you? What are their lives like at the moment? Christian, thanks so much for joining us from Leeds, just outlining some of the concerns that students here in England have at the moment with the cost of living crisis. Migrants who cross the English Channel on small boats to enter the UK will be removed from the country, banned from future re-entry, and will be unable to apply for British citizenship under new legislation. In the coming days, the government is going to lay out its plans to fulfil one of the Prime Minister's pledges to crack down on people who enter the UK illegally. Well, Ali is an asylum seeker who made the crossing himself. He spoke to the BBC earlier about his experience and the impact this bill will have on people like him.
to have an agreement with France.
Peter, I'm really sorry to interrupt you right now. We have to take our viewers to the Old Bailey, where Judge Mrs. Justice May is delivering her sentencing remarks. This is in the case of Wayne Couzens. Now, the former Met police officer being sentenced for indecent exposure, one of the offences he committed just days before he killed a young woman here in England, Sarah Everard. Let's listen.
The defendant appeared before Westminster Magistrates Court, charged with 4 counts of exposure arising from visits.
The reason I think that that has been interrupted is possibly for legal reasons, things we are not allowed to show, but we can return to it now. This may happen again, so do bear with us.
A trial date of the 6th of March 2023 was subsequently identified. In the meantime, on the 2nd of September 2022, he was charged on a separate indictment with 2 further counts of exposure arising from earlier incidents in June 2015 and November 2020. The Crown applied to join both indictments so that all offences could be heard together at a single trial. On the 2nd of October 2022, I heard a defence application to stay all counts on both indictments for abuse, on the principal basis that the defendant's notoriety would prevent his having a fair trial. 2 on indictment number T 2022-0638. The sentence is one of 19 months imprisonment. There will be concurrent sentences of 6 months on each of counts 2 and 3 on indictment T 2022-0320. The total sentence is accordingly one of 19 months. As I've already said, an existing whole of life sentence from which the defendant will never be released.
Welcome to our viewers who are watching from around the world. What you are seeing are live pictures of the Old Bailey here in London, where Judge Mrs. Justice May is delivering her sentencing remarks in the case of Wayne Couzens. He is being sentenced for indecent exposure, one of the offences committed just days before he killed Sarah Everard. Now, he is not in court. He has appeared via video link from Franklin Prison, where he is serving a whole life sentence for murdering Sarah Everard in March 2021. She was only 33 years old. The reason this case is so significant is that the case of Sarah Everard sparked national outcry, calls for more action to tackle violence against women as well, and it did real damage to society's confidence in the police. So there was a huge amount of reaction and response to the Sarah Everard case, which is one of the reasons why this sentencing has been so closely followed. So that was live pictures we were just seeing from the Old Bailey. This is BBC News. Welcome if you're watching here in the UK or around the globe. I'm Lucy Hockings. Our top stories. 1 month on after the devastating earthquakes that killed more than 50,000 people in Turkey and Syria, many are still living without proper shelter.
You can't deal with devastation on a scale like this in days or even in weeks. The impact of this is going to be felt by people here in southern Turkey for years.
A suicide attack in southwest Pakistan has killed at least 9 police officers. The explosion struck a police truck in Baluchistan province. Migrants crossing the English Channel in small boats would be banned from ever returning to the UK under new government plans. Refugee charities say the proposals are unfair and unworkable. Bangladeshi authorities are investigating the cause of a massive fire in the world's largest refugee camp. 12,000 people have now been left without shelter. And the stars behind the Irish comedy, the Banshees of Inisherin, speak to us ahead of the Oscars, which are on Sunday.
To feel it as colloquial and then see it go out into the world and be received by people from all sorts of, the corners of the globe that we share has been pretty surprising and cool.
Hello, welcome to BBC News. We start with breaking news from the Old Bailey here in London. The former Met Police officer Wayne Couzens has been sentenced to 19 months in prison today after admitting to 3 counts of indecent exposure, one of which he committed 4 days before killing Sarah Everard. To remind you, though, he is currently serving a whole life term for the murder of 33-year-old Sarah Everard. Here is Wayne Couzens. He did not appear in court. He was there via video link from Franklin Prison, where, as I mentioned, he is serving a whole life sentence for murdering Sarah Everard in March 2021. And to explain to our viewers around the world, that was a hugely significant case for many people in England because of the national outcry over her death, the fact that he was a serving police officer, the calls there were at the time for more action to tackle violence against women. There were protests on the streets across the UK as well, and it was seen that this case did a huge amount of damage to how women particularly saw police and their confidence in the police as well. So you're looking at a picture of Wayne Couzens. He's 50. He did not appear in court. He appeared via video link from Franklin Prison. We will take you to the Old Bailey shortly. And of course, bbc.co.uk/news has a live page up and running for you right now, just taking you through what has happened in court today and the background to the case. So if you'd like to follow this, do watch and follow live on the website as well. Exactly a month after the devastating earthquakes which killed more than 50,000 people across Turkey and Syria, an unprecedented number of people are living without proper shelter. The UNDP, estimating that in Turkey alone, at least 1.5 million people still inside the disaster zone are homeless, and that true figure could be even higher. Our correspondent Anna Foster has all the latest from Antakya. Anna Foster there, and we will be live in Turkey and Syria throughout the day. But let's take you to Pakistan now, where a suicide bomber has killed at least 9 policemen. The explosion striking a police truck in the southwestern city of Sibbi, which is in Baluchistan province. Hospital medics are saying at least 15 others have been injured in the blast. There has been a series of recent attacks across Pakistan that's targeted police officers. What is not clear is who is behind this latest incident. Our Pakistan correspondent Caroline Davies is following the story for us and sent us this update. Police searching for 3 women and 2 men who were reported missing after a night out in Cardiff have found 3 of them dead and 2 with serious injuries. The 5 friends were last seen in Cardiff in the early hours of Saturday night. Gwyn police say the car was recovered in the early hours of this morning. The 3 dead have not been identified yet, but let's bring you the very latest from Paul Griffith, who is following the case for us from Cardiff. Well, Griffiths there with the latest from Wales. So the 5 friends have been named, but an investigation is now underway into the circumstances of that car crash in Wales. Thanks for being with us. You're watching BBC News. Prime Minister Mitsotakis of Greece has asked for forgiveness from the families of 57 people who died in a rail crash on Tuesday. He said it should not have been possible for 2 trains heading in different directions to run on the same line without anyone noticing. Thousands of protesters, including striking rail workers, have again clashed with police. They blame the collision on government neglect. Sophia Patisa reports. Let's return now to those devastating pictures we've been seeing today out of Turkey and Syria. It's been 1 month since the earthquakes that killed more than 50,000 people, and there are such big challenges on the ground that remain immense and immediate. So many people still without shelter. Well, Joe English from UNICEF is helping with relief efforts inside Syria, and he told me his assessment of what is happening on the ground there at the moment. Joe English there, who is with UNICEF, but he was talking to us from Syria, and we will be in Syria and Turkey throughout the day. But let's update you on a few of the day's other top stories. Initial results from Estonia's general election suggest victory for the Prime Minister Kaja Kallas and her Reform Party. With most of the ballots counted, it secured about 1/3 of the votes. The election was dominated by Estonia's stance on the war in Ukraine. The British government has said it will continue to support students accepted by the European Union's key scientific research programme Horizon after their situation had been left in doubt following Brexit. The UK will continue its financial support till June, bridging the funding gap left by the EU. Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan has been barred from making speeches on the country's national television. Pakistan's media regulator accused him of repeating baseless allegations against state institutions and spreading hate speech. Mr. Khan says these allegations are politically motivated. Hugo Chavez has been remembered by Venezuelans 10 years after his death. There were rallies throughout the country while top government figures attended the main event in Caracas, as did international allies, including a high-level delegation from Cuba. It's already won 4 BAFTAs and it's been nominated for no less than 9 Oscars. The Banshees of Inisherin is the Irish movie taking the award season by storm. Sophie Long has been talking with some of the stars behind the dark comedy. One to watch. You're watching BBC News.
Hello there. Cold polar air is sweeping southwards into northern Europe, really dropping the temperatures and bringing a return of some snowfall.
Where we saw
Plenty of
quite
snow
a bit
showers
of
working into
snow. Now
northern
there's snow in the
Scotland,
forecast
northeast England,
as we go through
and
this
then this
week,
area of low
potentially as
pressure
far
working
south.
across.
How do you sit across by meeting the table return to try to stop
heightened awareness
the war
of what's possible? Constant assessment. Determine the best position. Catch the perfect wave. CME Group, where risk meets opportunity.
Adherent to Russia's invasion, Ukrainecast continues to keep you informed.
There'll just be one family that stays to look after the village's pets whilst that village is getting bombed.
With twice-weekly updates.
People who are
keep on track with the world of athletics on the BBC Sport website and app.
Believe what they say.
Ukrainecast.
Get the latest news, results and reaction with our...
This is BBC News. Welcome if you're watching here in the UK or around the globe. I'm Lucy Hockings. Our top stories. 1 month after the devastating earthquakes that killed more than 50,000 people in Turkey and Syria, many are still living without proper shelter.
You can't deal with devastation on a scale like this in days or even in weeks. The impact of this is going to be felt by people here in southern Turkey for years.
In the UK, the former Met police officer Wayne Couzens, who is already serving life for murdering Sarah Everard, is now given 19 months in prison for indecent exposure, offences he carried out in the months before abducting and raping Sarah. A suicide attack in southwest Pakistan has killed at least 9 police officers. The explosion struck a police truck in Baluchistan province. Migrants crossing the English Channel in small boats would be banned from ever returning to the UK under new government plans, but refugee charities say the proposals are unfair and unworkable. Bangladesh authorities are investigating the cause of a massive fire in the world's largest refugee camp. 12,000 people have now been left without shelter. Let's start by taking you to Bangladesh and that story where thousands of people have been left without shelter. There was a massive fire that broke out in a crowded Rohingya refugee camp in the southeast of the country. The blaze engulfed about 2,000 shelters at Cox's Bazar. It's estimated around 12,000 refugees, most of whom escaped violence in neighbouring Myanmar, are now homeless. Hundreds are now returning to the area to see what they can salvage from the ruins. Very dramatic pictures of the fire. Let's take you to Dhaka. We can join the BBC's Akbar Hussain, who is there. Akbar, any word from the authorities who are investigating the fire as to what actually caused it? Let's take you back to Turkey and Syria. It's been exactly a month since devastating earthquakes struck there, killing more than 50,000 people. The challenges on the ground remain immense. Many people still without shelter. The UN Development Programme estimates that in Turkey alone, at least 1.5 million people still inside the disaster zone are homeless. Let's cross to Turkey now. We can speak to Tom Bamforth, who is Assistant Country Director for CARE. Very good to see you, Tom. There are so many needs 1 month on, but if you could pinpoint one thing that you're most concerned about today at this moment, what would it be? Thomas Bamforth, good luck in the coming days and weeks. Thank you very much for joining us from Gaziantep.
Thank you.
Migrants who cross the English Channel on small boats to enter the UK will be removed from the country, banned from future re-entry and unable to apply for British citizenship under new legislation. In the coming days, the government will lay out its plans to fulfil one of the Prime Minister's pledges to crack down on people who enter the UK illegally. Let's take you over to Simon Jones, who is in Dover. Simon, just tell us more about some of these proposed changes and whether or not there's actually anything new in them. Simon, thanks so much. Simon Jones joining us from Dover. Now, when Elon Musk took over Twitter last year, he immediately sacked huge numbers of people as part of his plans to transform the company. Now, a BBC investigation has been told Twitter is no longer able to protect users from online abuse, child sexual exploitation, and state-coordinated disinformation. Well, the BBC's award-winning social media and disinformation correspondent, Mariana Spring, joins me now. Thought I'd just sneak that in, Mariana. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You've always kept a close eye on what's happening on Twitter, of course, but how did this particular story come to you?
You can all go and read on the BBC website.
Indeed we will, and of course you are always available should Elon Musk wish to get in contact and do an interview. Your DMs are open. Mariana, thank you so much. Former Met Police officer Wayne Couzens has been sentenced to 19 months in prison today after admitting to 3 counts of indecent exposure, one of which he committed 4 days before killing Sarah Everard. Let's just take you to Helena Wilkinson, who was at the Old Bailey listening in today. Just take us through the proceedings and what happened, Helena. You need some water, Helena. We'll come back to you in a moment once you've sorted that out. Lots of bugs and things going around at the moment. Lots of people with sore throats, but we'll just leave her for the moment and return to her. But Wayne Couzens, who was sentenced today, of course, in the Old Bailey. This was a really significant case here in the UK, the murder earlier of Sarah Everard. It led to a lot of protests on the streets, lots of concern about the role of the police as well. But just to be clear, the sentencing today was 4 cases of indecent exposure, one of those offences committed before he killed Sarah Everard. Ambulance workers in England have called off strikes which were due to take place today and Wednesday. The Unite union will enter pay talks with ministers. 2 other ambulance workers' unions, Unison and GMB, had already paused their walkouts after what they said was a huge shift in the government's position. The trial of a man accused of shooting dead a 9-year-old girl inside her own home in Liverpool is due to begin today. Olivia Pratt-Corbell was killed in August last year when a gunman allegedly opened fire while chasing another man who had forced his way into the house. 34-year-old Thomas Cashman denies murder. Not all pupils have been able to make it to school recently because of illness. So some schools are bringing the classroom to them by using robots, which can act like teachers or classmates. David Lump's been to see one in action. We can take you back now to Helena, who's had a glass of water. She's at the Old Bailey for us. Helena, you were taking us through what happened in court today in the sentencing of Wayne Couzens. Helena, thank you. As children here in the UK are heading back to school, one group of friends in Greater Manchester has a fresh new look. They have all shaved their heads. Now, it's not a fashion statement. It's a gesture of support for their mate Oliver, who lost his hair while being treated for a brain tumour.
Ian Haslam, BBC News.
What an uplifting way to end that wall of support around Oliver. Congratulations to them. Quite a gesture from Oliver's army. Thanks for being with us on BBC News.
Hello again. This picture behind me was taken last night in Shetland, where we saw quite a bit of snow. Now there's